Our guest today is John Strand. John Strand is the author of Patriot Plea, The J6 Journey of a Political Prisoner in the Divided States of America. And he is also a Republican candidate for U.S. Congress in Florida's 19th District. A former actor, model, and creative director for America's Frontline Doctors, John Strand was charged in connection with the events of January 6, 2021. He refused a plea deal, stood trial, and served time in federal prison, including 4 months in solitary confinement. His obstruction charge was later vacated following a U.S. Supreme Court ruling, and he received a full pardon from President Trump. You can find out more information about John, including his campaign, at johnstrand.com. For those of you watching on YouTube, I've got a copy of the cover. There's also one next to John, too, on his screen. But here we go. John Strand, Patriot Plea. The forward is by Eric Metaxas, which I didn't realize Eric was doing my taxes, but somebody should. John Strand, welcome to the Bruce Collins Show.
Amazing, Bruce. It's so great to be with you. Thank you for having me and for doing the work that you're doing to defend liberty in America, because she is worth fighting for.
Well, it's an honor to have you on. And again, as we said, your book is Patriot Plea. It's a great book. And you start the book by introducing yourself as an actor. Can you explain the importance of that?
Yes, actually. And as I say in that introduction, it's less about my vocation, although I did work as an actor and loved that field. And I really loved being creative and working to represent my values and my mission as an American and as a Christian in a difficult industry like Hollywood and media and entertainment. But the reason I introduced myself that way was to really set the theme of how I wanted to carry this story. And it's not just a story about me, but about America and where we are as a nation right now and where we're going. And I believe that the core precept that people should understand about our country is that it's about agency and free will, that we exercise and that we make choices, and it's incumbent on us to take action based on our beliefs, values, and choices, whether we realize we're making them or not. So we're all actors on the grand stage of our lives in that sense, and I wanted to kind of set that theme and expectation.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us about Dr. Simone Gold and Frontline Doctors and your relationship with her organization?
Yes, Dr. Gold is an extraordinary person, and she was an anonymous emergency room physician when I met her and when COVID came crashing down around all of us back in 2020. She's an incredibly brilliant Jewish-American woman, originally from New York, went to Chicago Medical School and got her JD as a lawyer from Stanford University in California, and then had been practicing ER medicine anonymously in California for over 20 years when COVID struck. I had been working as an actor and writer, spokesman, model, musician throughout many years in Los Angeles and Hollywood, as well as New York and overseas. And when COVID came, I instantly recognized it for the fraudulent scheme it was and organized a freedom rally in the streets of California and Los Angeles, of all places, which President Trump actually tweeted to celebrate because it was so vibrant, drawing tens of thousands. And the success of that rally, first of all, made it clear that America overall was waking up to this scam and pushing back. It also allowed us to bring in a number of excellent conservative leaders at the time: Dennis Prager, Dave Rubin, Katie Hopkins, Scott Baum, Will Witt, many great folks, Brandon Struck from the Walkaway campaign. But Dr. Gold had come to prominence by leading a group of freedom doctors to do a press conference on the steps of the Supreme Court on July 27th, 2020. And we brought her soon thereafter as a speaker to our rally, and then several times. So I began working for Frontline Doctors in a full-time capacity by about October of 2020. I'm the creative director there still, 6 years strong, as well as at goldcare.com, the medical freedom platform that we're now building out.
Mm-hmm. And as part of your book, a big portion of your book is regarding January 6th. Again, the title is Patriot Plea. Can you take us back to January 6th, 2021? What did you experience that day?
What I would definitely suggest is that people watch the video we created using security footage from the Capitol surveillance system. It's mind-blowing when you watch this video that we put together. It's only about 13 minutes of footage, but I didn't cut anything out from the time. I just sped up certain parts that are boring. So you watch the entire journey. I was in there for about 48 minutes total, but you can find this video at johnstrand.com/J6. Takes you directly to that link. And it's extraordinary. I narrate it from my point of view as it happened, and you can get a sense of what actually happened and happened to me particularly. Of course, I was scheduled to be there along with Dr. Gold representing frontline doctors. We were invited to speak along with numerous Congress people at a rally with a government-approved permit for Section 8 on the northeast corner of the Capitol grounds. So we attended the morning speech at the Ellipse with President Trump and others, and then proceeded for the ceremonial march that was scheduled weeks in advance to happen between the morning speech at the Ellipse and afternoon speeches on Capitol grounds. But once we got there, we didn't see a stage, nor any crowd control or law enforcement directives. Any modest fencing or anything else like that was already removed by the time I got there. So there was zero indication whatsoever that people weren't supposed to be on the grounds, which of course they were, because that's where the speech was scheduled to happen. But there wasn't any indication about being on the steps really either. There were about 4 or 5 cops that I saw on the steps right in front of the Columbus doors, and that was about it. So a large crowd was gathering, expecting speeches, which never happened. Dr. Gold took to the stairs to try to get attention and give remarks as best she could to the crowd that was assembled. But we got kind of smashed up in that crowd and weren't able to move much. And then when we've otherwise would have expected for the crowd to dissipate or for law enforcement to come and help them to dissipate. Law enforcement eventually instead came and assaulted the crowd and violently so out of nowhere. So a crowd that was otherwise positive, peaceful, boisterous, and I didn't see or sense any real issues, suddenly was whipped into a frenzy with what sounded like bombs going off, flashbangs that panicked the crowd, and smoke and chemicals filling the air and people getting involved in skirmishes. And that very quickly changed the tenor of the feel of what was going on. And then the doors in front of us opened from the inside. We couldn't see or understand how that happened, but we got pushed in by the crowd all around, flushing through that entrance into the rotunda area.
Yeah, interesting. So johnstrand.com/J6, you can see the video there. And you mentioned in your book, I believe, that the FBI put you on a most wanted poster. Can you talk about your due process and what you call in your book the poisonous plea?
Yes. So due process was obliterated in so many different ways. I list a number of them with details in the book. But just off the top, the fact that people were rounded up by Nazi Germany-esque SWAT raids that were clearly politicized and often against families with children, and they even timed these so the children would be present and traumatized. I mean, I've documented this myself and share some of those details in the book and in my social media accounting over the years. For myself, I was assaulted by a 20-man tactical team with machine guns. They shattered my front door with a battering ram. Meanwhile, this is in downtown Beverly Hills, one of the safest areas on planet Earth. The idea of taking a SWAT team there is just ludicrous on its face. Not only that, I found out at trial they were surveilling me, shooting long-range cameras in the bushes for 7 consecutive days, a full week of surveillance, as I would just take my daily walk through the neighborhood up to the grocery store and back. And then they decided to pounce a week later and shatter the door and assault us with machine guns and terrify us to death. So that alone was traumatic, abusive, and just absolutely disgusting. We were then disappeared into jail, myself, for 4 straight days without ever having a phone call. My colleague and co-defendant was released the next day, and then she hired a private investigator to find out where I was because no one was allowing her to figure that out. So eventually I was bonded out with a ankle monitor, which they had no legitimate pretext for, which we then got lawyers to argue that and get that removed. But the abuses and persecution and harassment just continued from that point for almost 2 years until I finally made it to trial in September of 2022.
I'm sure you remember when Roger Stone was arrested. The liberal media was there. Somehow they got tipped off he was going to get arrested. Was the media there when you were arrested?
No, there was no media when I got arrested that I'm aware of. There was also very little media at Washington, D.C. on January 6th, which was bizarre that there wouldn't have been TV crews and cameras and a variety of media covering a very important and, in fact, historic moment with the President of the United States giving a very noteworthy address along with other speakers, numerous Congress people scheduled to speak that day as well. So that was a bizarre situation. But yeah, I did not see or know any media when we were assaulted.
Yeah, those months were bizarre. Those COVID years. We had the
Yeah.
BLM riots before that, and not much from the liberal media about that. Now,
Oh,
can
well,
you
they
explain?
praised and excused it, in fact. And
Yeah.
those BLM riots, the Summer of Love, was actually a specific part of my story, kind of pivoting from my career and my sense of what my life was about, and really felt the still small voice of God calling me to speak against the lies of the BLM Marxism in our culture. And that was a part of turning into what eventually became a freedom rally and my work with frontline doctors and everything else since then. So.
Mhm. So, explain your time in prison. And I understand it was solitary confinement for the most part, at least. What was that like?
Well, yeah. So the book is the best way to learn because it's kind of hard to describe succinctly, other than to say it was terrible. The prison is an awful place. You
Mhm.
might think, well, it's supposed to be, but that's not exactly true. Certainly not in the way that it is. It's extremely corrupt. So simply from a taxpayer point of view, and just from an ethical and moral citizen's point of view, it's absolutely just disgraceful, and very problematic, again, for the taxpayers, but also for the supposed system of justice to uphold the rule of law and to repair victims and rehabilitate offenders. None of which is actually happening by and large. And so suffering prison was an uh, extreme. It
Yeah.
was awful, and that was just the first part. Regular prison. I was in a higher security federal prison, which I was not rated for, even under the pretense of the charges against me. So I have no criminal background. Obviously, I had no allegations of violent behavior. So I would have been rated according to the Bureau of Prisons' own rating system and their internal rules. I was rated only for the very lowest level, which is called a federal prison camp. The camp doesn't even have walls
Hmm.
or and so forth. So it's more like a college dorm that you have to keep certain hours, and there are guards that pay attention, but there's some level of freedom. It's sort of a halfway position between a halfway house and a prison. So that would have been the appropriate selection for me based on their own rules, which they just violated, arbitrarily saying, J6 terrorist, he's dangerous, put him in this prison instead. But we had documentation from the trial transcripts where my lawyer actually, the judge asked my lawyer, do you have any recommendations or an opinion on placement as far as the prison? And of course, we were prepared. So the lawyer said, yes, the Pensacola camp is the appropriate facility in his state of residence. And the judge said, great, put that on the transcript, that we will make that recommendation. But then, of course, the BOP did as they wished and put me in a terrible, terrible place.
Hmm. And again, we're speaking with John Strand today. He is the author of Patriot Plea. Excellent book. Check it out. Uh, John, I know in talking to you today and also in reading your book that this is an important part of your life, but how important was your faith during this time?
Yeah, Bruce, it was everything. And, I always tell people that, yes, my faith is truly what made it possible for me to survive this. But not only that, it was my faith that allowed me to enter into this situation in the first place. And that's the meaning behind the title, Patriot Plea. It's a double meaning because I'm making a plea to the country to revive a new wave of patriots. So I am calling the country to revive patriotism and to engage in their civic responsibility and their American opportunity to chase that dream and protect our rights and our freedoms for future generations. But first, I had to turn down a false plea, a plea deal that would have made my life far easier. And most people in the situation would have done that. There's no doubt. You can ask Dr. Gold. She did it herself in the exact same set of circumstances, and she can explain why. But she'll often say on my behalf that she's confident nearly no one would have chosen the path that I did, simply because it was so awful and so egregious. And there was absolutely a full moral explanation and pathway to take the plea deal, because we knew the whole situation was false and partisan and weaponized. But nevertheless, it was crystal clear to me that it was a fundamental moral decision between right and wrong, good and evil, and that I was being pressured to bow down to an evil agenda And they gave me a tempting offer to do that with this plea deal. And that was the poisonous plea that I mentioned. Not only that they coerced me, but that they set up an incredible amount of pressure for many hundreds, thousands, or over 1,000. There were almost 1,600 indictments. And so many, many hundreds of these folks faced 20-year felonies and monstrous charges that would destroy their entire lives. And then they were offered plea deals to alleviate that. And of course, the vast majority of them quickly took them. So the number and the speed at which they took those plea deals was all part of the strategy by the DOJ to create a false narrative that these people intended to commit crimes and overthrow the government. They planned it ahead of time and they were committed to actually violating the law. And of course, that's nonsense. There was no plan. The idea of overthrowing the government is ludicrous on its face. So you would have been insane to even want to do that. But most people obviously didn't want to do that in any sense at all. They were there to exercise their First Amendment right to protest. But refusing that plea deal was the pivot point in the story, and that gives you that patriot plea title. But it's only my faith in God that allowed me to make such a decision, both with my conviction on what was right and wrong and my hope and faith and confidence that God would protect my physical well-being and that he had a plan for what seemed totally awful with no way out.
Mm. Once you were pardoned and set free, what was the point where you decided to enter politics?
Well, to start, I just want to clarify the record. Legally speaking, technically I wasn't pardoned because I didn't take the plea deal. So I pled not guilty, appealed, and eventually won my entire case when the DOJ vacated all 5 charges. And that's actually the best case scenario. It's even better than winning the appeal by a judicial ruling because the DOJ rescinds their charges, which means they're reversed as if they had never been brought in the first place. So in the final accounting, there is no case or charge against me. It was just erased. And so I'm legally exonerated in that sense within the judicial process, which is a part, aside from the weaponized usage of it, that would have been the desired appropriate outcome in the judicial process.
Right.
So that's, very noteworthy and important. And I think it's exciting just to finish that storyline of the faith in God, the faith in God's word, in his biblical truth and biblical promises, that he did work an absolute miracle in my life and in this situation. And that was a big part of his faithfulness in my obedience to his calling in those moments. But another calling came while I was in prison as to entering into the political realm and running for public office. It's interesting. I actually worked on a campaign for public office when I was in high school. I was one of the leading helpers for Senator Kevin Lundberg, who was a known leader for the homeschool movement, and I was homeschooled. Kevin Lundberg and I remain good friends to this day. He's proudly endorsed our campaign at johnstrand.com for Congress in Southwest Florida. But that was an interesting experience back in high school. I learned that some aspects of politics were very enjoyable and interesting, and I was good at them. But I also realized how corrupt politics was, and I found it very distasteful. So full circle, some years later, in a prison cell, I realized what's at stake and how bad it's gotten in this nation, which of course is what I talk about in the book. But I also truly believe that there are so few men of courage and faith willing and able to actually get back into the government and lead our nation back to those fundamentals of freedom that I believe are absolutely essential. And I just really believed God had called me to step into that arena myself. And I'm running for Congress at johnstrand.com.
So what do you think sets you apart from the politicians that are in Washington today?
Oh yeah, that's the most important question, and the thing that sets me apart without a question is the character and integrity to do what's right when the pressure is enormous against you. So a lot of people will say the right things. Most of them know how to do that, and every 2 years you hear politicians tickle your ears with all the things you want to hear. That's handy at getting them elected. They're very good at doing it. Problem is, hearing what you want to hear isn't always what should be happening in everyone's best interest. But even if they said the right things, they often fail to actually carry them out for a litany of reasons. But the point is, we have this almost expectation at this point, totally an expectation, that they're politicians, they're going to say whatever sounds good, and they're just going to perpetuate the status quo when they get there. And the vast majority of them do that at best and, flame out with incredible levels of corruption at worst. So the thing that would set me apart, without question, is actual courage under fire. I've learned that's not a slogan. It's the difference between freedom and tyranny. And we have a massive deficit of both truth and courage in our political realm and in our government. So policy is very important, but I often tell people we don't have as much a policy problem, much more so we have a truth and a courage problem. On the left, they're trying to invert truth and tell you it doesn't matter. You can decide it on yourself based on your feelings, and that boys can become girls and all of this other total insanity. So there's an all-out war against truth, but there's also a war against courage. And on the conservative Republican side, where we still purport to defend biological reality of boys and girls and so forth, there is no courage or very little to actually defend the truth. And this is what's really brought me into the political realm. It's less that I want or am interested in being a politician, and much more so that I feel it's necessary at this time for, again, men of courage and faith to stand up, be counted, and take strong action against evil and defending the innocent and defending our constitutional rights.
Mm-hmm. Now, many in Washington call themselves conservative, but they often mean very different things. If you had to define conservative, what principles are absolutely non-negotiable?
Great question. And to start, I would say that conservative comes from the word conserve, and that is to protect and preserve, or to maintain the longevity of something that you consider worthwhile. And so what do we consider worthwhile? This is another way of saying, what are your values? So if you don't know what is valuable to you, you're not in any way prepared to make decisions at all, much less good decisions, and you'll be blown about by all kinds of pressures and winds. And so I think it's so important to have a question about values, which is to say, what is good and what is not good or evil? And this is the paramount question that we need to engage and we need to wrestle, and has been totally kind of lost in the noise. I think we may have lost Bruce.
It's what it is. Are you okay now, right now?
I'm great. Yep. My connection remained.
Okay, perfect. Maybe I'll leave that in just for dramatic effect.
Yeah,
Now,
it could work out.
never happens. So I asked you about conservatism and how you would define it. So that's excellent. Here's another issue. Both Republican and Democratic presidents have expanded executive power. And we also have this massive debt. Do you believe conservatives have been as committed to constitutional limits when their party controls the White House?
That's a great question. I'd say that they've been maybe slightly more committed or compliant with constitutional guardrails, but very so slightly. So I would say that by and large, the government overall, Republican, Democrat, and otherwise, very much functions as a uniparty. And a uniparty swamp, in the sense that it is very self-protecting, and it is very corrupt, and it's just a disgrace in the moral sense of the word as well as the civic sense. And so it's a huge problem. And my mission running for Congress at johnstrand.com is, we say, to reclaim the republic. That's how we summarize the mission statement. And what we mean is that America is a constitutional republic, not a pure democracy or a theocracy or an autocracy. It is supposed to be ruled by consent of the governed through representative leadership that we elect at various levels, and an emphasis on the decentralization of power and the separation of powers principle, which was so key to the founders' design, which was beautiful and brilliant and balanced. We've lost that entirely. It's insane how large the federal government is compared to the states and the local levels of government. And local control is an incredibly important concept, a key concept to a healthy republic and to maximizing the liberty of the people. Again, that's the premise of America, is to protect and expand liberty, opportunity, justice, morality, all of these things. And the more power that you have decentralized and placed as close to the proximity of what's relevant as possible, that is to say local control, that more functional and healthy the government will be, and the more your civilization will flourish. But we're going in the opposite direction by 1,000 miles, or very far away. A couple key points on that I would mention are that the 16th Amendment of the Constitution, and I would say people should be very skeptical anytime people want to amend and change the Constitution in any way for any reason, because most of the time when we've done it, it's been for the worse, and sometimes far so. I would say if you pick one day in American history that the Republic began to decline, I would say it was February 3rd, 1913, which of course passed the 16th Amendment, allowing a direct taxation of the people by the federal government as well as the Federal Reserve, both terrible institutions. So I'm calling to abolish the IRS and eventually repeal the 16th Amendment, eradicating direct taxation of the people by the federal government, because the states should be a barrier between them in that sense, according to the 10th Amendment principle.
Yeah. 20 years ago, I got my start in radio by being on a syndicated radio program. We were in over 80 markets, and I did a book review. And I basically would take these liberal personalities, their books, and pick them apart. And
Oh, wow.
One of the books was by Bill Maher, and he had written about how Bush hated transgenders and all sorts of lunacy. The Democratic Party is easy pickings for the conservatives who can shine right now when they're chasing after socialism and Sharia law enough to make somebody like Bill Maher look like a moderate Republican. I mean, it's so bad in the Democratic Party right now that the conservatives really can stand out. And if they stick to their principles, I really think we could have at least a political revival in this country. If Americans could forget every campaign slogan and every party label for just one day, what do you think are the most important responsibilities of a government to its citizens?
This is also a great question, Bruce. These are fundamentals that our society has really lost track of. So people aren't even really asking these questions, and it's so important to ask them and answer them correctly. This is a basic. I write this in my book, that if a politician cannot answer that question appropriately, run the other direction. And that is to say, our rights come from God, not from government, and government's only valid purpose is to protect our rights from infringement by others. Their role is not to help us. Remember the 9 most terrifying words in the English language, according to another California actor who became a public official.
Right.
I'm here from I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. So government is not supposed to be helping people. The whole idea of welfare is unconstitutional and totally ineffective. It's created dependency, weak people, poverty, and exploitation. It's absolutely awful. It's just awful. And so it's not to say that compassion and helping people isn't a good thing. It's just not the government's job. And when you have people doing the wrong job or doing the job that belongs to someone else, it's never going to work out well. But it's particularly going to work out poorly when it's being done by an entity that's empowered with guns to turn on its own people and enforce justice. So the state is supposed to have the job of enforcing the rule of law and bringing justice to punish criminals and protect the innocent. That is what we have a government for. But it's not for them to run the schools and indoctrinate your children. It's not for them to control your health care and your retirement planning. It's not for them to do all kinds of things that the government spends 90% of its $7 trillion a year budget doing. I mean, all of this stuff's just totally insane, wildly off track and out of bounds. And so the Constitution is a dead letter, in effect, at this point. We need to not rewrite it or amend it, other than repealing the bad amendments. We need to reread it and apply it faithfully. And the only way to do that, Bruce, honestly, is to cultivate virtue in our society. So you said if we could just drop the labels and pursue a political revival for a moment. And I love the sentiment, but my honest, sober analysis that is that the truth of the matter, and I want to stick to the truth and not traffic in fantasies that sound nice but will never pan out. The truth is that, as Andrew Breitbart taught us, politics is downstream from culture, and culture, as I explained in Patriot Plea, is downstream from the wellspring of the human heart. So that garden of the soul in a human is where this all really starts. And we've lost track of that. What's happened in our country is that our society has divorced itself from God. And remember,
Yeah.
our rights come from God, where the government is only supposed to be protecting those rights from infringement. But when God is disconnected, now government is the source of our rights, and that authorizes them to help people and then take it away when they so choose.
Yeah. I just had a conversation with somebody yesterday, and it's funny because the Liberal Party always tends to create a label, a catchphrase for something they want to do, which actually means the opposite of what the words they use. Gun control is gun chaos. Inflation Reduction Act caused insane inflation. They talked about Biden, who was the head of the Biden crime family, talked about the student loans bailing people out. Well, what are you going to do with the taxpayers who became entrepreneurs after high school? What are you going to do to the folks that paid as they went along in their college? You're going to penalize them by not giving them money, but you're going to bail out somebody else who took out these massive loans. It's just lunacy what they're doing. Anyway, I want to give you the floor at the end. We've been speaking with John Strand. Patriot Plea is the book. Check it out today. It's at Amazon.com and wherever fine books are sold. Last question. What can people find at your website, johnstrand.com, and how can they support you?
Yeah, Bruce, thank you so much for inviting that support. It's actually critical right now at this moment. You're in Arizona, I understand, with a primary that's happening, and I am in Southwest Florida. We have one of the later primaries. So on August 18, we have a chance to vote for change, to vote for courage, to vote John Strand, patriot for Congress. And people listening to this all over the nation absolutely can help. And it's important because every vote in Congress affects you no matter what state you're in. So any congressional race that you're able to engage in, if you're able to make a difference and put a true patriot in Congress, man, that is really important and really exciting. Now, not all races are the same, but what you'll find at johnstrand.com is that there is a true patriot running to be a difference maker in a crowded Republican primary where the Republican will win the general in this seat. So the primary is the election. There are 10 Republicans running. Most of them are what I call rhino rejects, older, very rich, have lost numerous races, and whatever else the case may be. And most of them aren't even from Florida. Although I wasn't born in Florida, but I've lived here for over 4 years, and I didn't move here to run for public office. So I'm authentically engaged in the community where we've been working to protect family values and family rights. I've been speaking against the sexual grooming of the Pride trans cult at Fort Myers Courthouse and Naples City Council, urging them to declare Naples a sanctuary city for decency and to banish the Pride movement from our public streets and from our playgrounds where they're literally trying to proselytize young children with this garbage. It's just disgusting. And so you'll find a patriot running for office in Florida's 19th district who wants to really represent the people and who wants to really make change in Washington to deal with the entrenched corruption that's lasted forever, who wants to make fundamental policy changes to help Americans, like repealing the federal income tax and actually engaging in protecting our borders and our sovereignty with a immigration moratorium. We previously had not a 20-year, but a 40-year moratorium on immigration from 1924 to 1964. And most people don't even know that happened. They certainly don't know that during that time, income for Black families skyrocketed over 300%, Bruce, and income for white families grew over 100%. So the middle class flourished and the minority poverty gap closed. Assimilation was happening and our culture was strengthened. So America was doing really well. It can happen again. And I'm calling for the 2020 Sovereignty Act to impose a minimum 20-year moratorium on immigration and at least 20 million deportations over the next 4 years. We need to greatly accelerate that rate. It's very simple and achievable with common sense policies like debanking illegal aliens fully, enforcing E-Verify, and causing them to deport themselves at a much less expensive manner to the taxpayer. So you'll find common sense policy solutions, the courage to actually enact them, and the wisdom to understand our American founding and history and reapply the constitutional principles and proper separation of powers that our founders actually designed originally. And those are what would actually keep us free going forward.
John Strand, the author of Patriot Plea, at johnstrand.com. Go there, find out about his campaign, help out, support him in the way that you can. Again, it's John Strand, S-T-R-A-N-D, Strand.
You got it. John Strand,
johnstrand.com.
Strand, absolutely. And every dollar is incredibly important. We're in a tight race. There's a lot of people running, but $25 or $100, as people can chip that in together, it's making a difference. We're rising in the polls right now, and you'll see some fascinating news stories in the press recently on our social media, X, Instagram, Facebook, at John Strand USA. And a lot of exciting things are happening here at johnstrand.com down in Southwest Florida.
Excellent. Thank you. And I hope I get to interview you again, but hopefully you'll be in an office.
Yes. We look forward to that. Thank you so much, Bruce. God bless you and your audience, and God bless the United States of America.
God bless you. Thank you. Okay, we're all